blood. My name is John. So, for all intents and purposes, let's pretend that it is Tuesday. Let's see, what day would that be? The 15th, I believe it is. Tuesday of March 15th, because that is actually when this video is going to post. So, by now, you have probably, if you are subscribed to them, and you should be because their channel is awesome, you have probably seen the Bookish Bryants announcement video for Horror Mayhem. Alright, so what exactly is Horror Mayhem? Now, Horror Mayhem is something that the Bookish Bryants themselves created. They came up with it all by themselves. But anyway, during the month of May, you got 4 weeks in the month of May. Each week is going to touch on a different genre of horror. Alright? So what I'm going to do here is tell you about those genres of horror that they're going to touch on, and also give you my TBR for this particular event. All right. So the first one that is going to be coming up in week 1 is supernatural horror or creature horror. That means if you want to read a book about ghosts, you can read a book about ghosts. If you want to read a book about vampires, you can read a book about vampires. Creatures would also be, they could be cryptids also. They could be read about Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Mothman, anything that falls into the supernatural and creature category. Now, I will say this much. I'm sure that a lot of these are going to kind of combine with each other. And if you want to read books, the same book for all 4, if you can find a short, and let me tell you this, I'm sorry, I'm getting off the track right here. I'm going to come back on the track in a minute. But anyway, what they want to concentrate on with these are short stories, novellas, and novels that are under 250 pages. All right, that's kind of the rules of this whole readathon event, whatever you want to call it. All right, so there you go. All right, now, so like I was saying, if you find a book that features all of these in one book, all the categories I'm going to talk about in one book, or a short story or whatever, then feel free, just do it, read it. That's great. You know, all right? Anyway, because this isn't really a challenge. It's not prompts or anything. These are just like, you know, this is just what they would like for you to read during this particular event. All right. Anyway, let me get back on track. Week number 2 is going to be Gothic Horror. All right. And Gothic Horror is stuff like Dracula, oh gosh, I'm trying to think here. You maybe could include The Haunting of Hill House as Gothic Horror, something like that, or just any story that you find that falls under the category of Gothic Horror. All right. Week number 3 is going to be Cosmic Horror. All right, and again, that is something left to your own interpretation. People like H.P. Lovecraft, of course, Victor LaValle, John Horner Jacobs has cosmic horror stories out. I'm trying to think of who else. I can't think of anybody right now. Oh, T.E.D. Klein had an old book in the 70s or 80s, I believe, called The Ceremonies. That's cosmic horror. All right. And then finally, week number 4 is going to be folk horror. Okay. If you want an example of folk horror, a book like Slewfoot could be folk horror. A movie like The Witch would be folk horror. Midsummer, a movie like Midsummer or The Wicker Man is definitely folk horror. The Ritual by Adam Neville could be considered folk horror, but it's pretty long, and like I said, keep it below 250 pages. Anyway, those are the 4 categories or genres, whatever you want to call them, for Horror Mayhem. So my TBR for this is week 1. I decided for supernatural and creatures, I decided to read a witch story, and I'm going to read The Hag Witch of Trip Creek. All right. And this is written by Summer Cannon. I don't really have a synopsis on this. I don't have a synopsis on any of these stories. I'm just going to tell you what I've read, or what I'm going to read. But anyway, the first one is going to be The Hag Witch of Trip Creek. So that's week 1. Okay, next up for week number 2, which is Gothic Horror, I am going to read, what was the story I was going to, yes, I am going to read Berenice and this is by Edgar Allan Poe. All right, and I am going to read it from this book right here, the Classic Gothic Horror Collection. Is that not a cool cover or what? Okay, all right. Okay, next up for Cosmic Horror, that's week number 3. I am going to read The Dreams in the Witch House, and that is by H.P. Lovecraft. And that is a story from the Necronomicon, Tales of Eldritch Horror from the masters of the genre. Alright, so I'm really not sure if The Dreams in the Witch House is actually considered a cosmic horror, but I'm gonna read it anyway because we know that Lovecraft himself was definitely a pretty much the granddaddy of cosmic horror. So there you go. Okay, and finally for folk horror, I actually have not decided on a story just yet for folk horror, but I got in the mail the other day this nice book here, A Walk in a Deeper Wood, and this is an anthology of folk horror, and it's edited by Dwayne Passis, Sarah Walker, and Gordon B. White, and these are all new stories of folk horror, so I've got a nice little selection of stories here to pick out a folk horror story. Alright, so now let's get into the co-host, and I will leave all the co-hosts. I'll mention all of them in the subscription description below. I will leave a link to all of their channels. I suggest if you are not subscribed to any of them or you're not subscribed to all of them, remedy that. Go in and subscribe to all these guys, all right? Because you know what? I wasn't subscribed to all of them. I went in and hit that subscribe button on every single one of them, okay? Because they all have something wonderful to bring to the table. So let's get it underway. Now, if you notice on the thumbnail, I listed all of them, and they're in alphabetical order. This is not in alphabetical order what I'm going to be reading. Of course, now this is going to be hosted by Scott and Becky, a.k.a. the Bookish Bryants. We already know that. All right, next up is going to be co-hosted by these folks here. Steve Donoghue, Plagued by Visions, Mindy's Book Journey, BNB Books, Hooked on Books with Chris, Jim Reads Too Slow, Michael K. Vaughan, Criminolly, Paul Reads Books, a.k.a. PRB, and Shawn D. Standfast. Those are your hosts and your co-hosts. Oh, and of course, yours truly. All right? We are your host and your co-host and all that jazz for Horror Mayhem. Starting the first week of May and just going on through the month of May. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.